Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kizia Sovereign, the treasurer of the Pelican Book Club, and today I have the pleasure of conversing with Jared Hosein, a Trinbagonian author, regional winner of the 2015 Commonwealth Short Story Prize, and overall winner of the 2018 Commonwealth Short Story Prize. Some of his published titles are Little Town Secrets, The Repenters, and The Beasts of Kukuyu, and his works have also been featured in numerous publications from Pepperpot, Best New Stories from the Caribbean, to New World's Old Ways, speculative tales from the Caribbean. His upcoming novel, Devotion, is set to be released in August 2022. Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here today with us. And how have you been these days?
Well, I mean, on the writing side of things, very good. On other things like online teaching, not very good. I mean, everybody know it is with that
Yes.
on both sides. But I mean, focusing on the writing, it has been I've had a good break because I've been working sort of nonstop for a year or two on this. So it's nice just to have it most of it off of my mind right now.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
everything is yeah. And how has things been with quarantine? Well, I know with school, as you said, it's online, so that's
Hmm.
been a bit rocky. But writing, would you say it has had a positive or a negative effect in terms of writing?
And with quarantine, well, as soon as quarantine started, I think we were one of the first to get the stay-at-home orders because schools were, I think, one of the first. So, but we had an online system already in place, so we were working not too long after that, like back to, like regular classes, but online. Um, I being home sort of it gave me more time because there was less time, I guess, spending physically in work and less time in commute. So I thought I had a little more time to myself. Um, until because online teaching sometimes could be double the work, but being home, I know that when I set up a space for myself, and that this was actually when I started back writing this novel. I put it down for a little while, and sometime in April or so I said, well, I should start this back since I'm home, and actually finished it in about probably in September, and then the editing process took a few months. It's a pretty rigorous process, and that was submitted. I was finished sometime in January or so, but then it still had some back and forths and so on. But yeah, but otherwise with quarantine, I think I've been fortunate to be working at home, even though I said online teaching is not the best thing. Still been staying safe and trying to keep with both sides of it, teaching and writing.
Right? Yeah, that sounds good. I'm glad that you've gotten a bit that time to yourself now to maybe put some more time into it. And I, I, I definitely can say as one of your readers that I am excited for the book release
Mm.
and that you've had that time to get that back on. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind Devotion and a bit of your writing process on that? So, yeah, I think a lot of us
Okay.
here are a bit excited to hear.
Okay, so devotion it started with an article. Commonwealth writers, they were now starting an online platform to host like short stories, poetry, nonfiction called Ada, and I think they started sending out requests for work in about, I think, around 2016. And I responded and I said, well, I will give it a shot. And they asked me for something that was non-fiction. So I'm not really big on nonfiction. So they said, well, write about anything from Trinidad. And so what I did was a lot of my stories, my short stories, are based on just things that I listen to, things that I overhear, things that I read in the papers. And that's something just told me that I wanted to go to my grandfather to ask him about how times were back then, like during those sugarcane days, and interviewed him for a couple hours. And then I wanted to correlate some of the information I had. So I was acquaintances with Angelo Bisesa Singh. But at the time he was kind of in the last stages of the pancreatic cancer. But I messaged him and he told me to come over and he would see, what he could add to it. So, I mean, I was very grateful for that because he is like a walking encyclopedia. And it was funny how he could have verified like the events, but my grandfather had like because he was actually there, he had like well, I could say like the personal part of it. So I'll give you an example. It's So he was telling me about, my grandfather was telling me about, there was this doctor's wife who was walking through the village. The village I'm talking about is a village called Lapai village in Caroni. That's actually where I was born. And the the doctor's wife was walking through that village and she tripped on a pothole, right? And fell into some mud and some child laughed at her. And he said, well, because of that, she said she will demolish half the village, right? And I thought I was like, that can't be true. Like that sounding like, that sounded like somebody made that sound like an exaggeration. So obviously Angelo wouldn't know this, but he said that yes, it had a time when half of the village was demolished, but he didn't know why. And so it was like, see, like that, things like that was like, well, everything in Trinidad has this kind of history to that unwritten. And I decided to just get more. I guess get more, so more out of it. So I interviewed like the village counselor, and just like my parents, my parents-in-law, and just got a bunch of information. And that day itself eventually formed the story. But that formed the backdrop of the story. The characters from the story is a different thing. But yeah, that's kind of how it was. I didn't really set out to, well, I wrote the article, and after I wrote the article, um, I wrote a short story in it and I submitted it for anthology, and they really liked the short story. And I was kind of stumped on what I wanted to do for a novel, and I said, well, I came back to that and I was like, I have so much information that a novel would be a kind of cool thing to write based on this. So that was it really.
Okay. And do you feel satiated knowing that you've gathered all of this information on something that may not have been known by even, well, as you just said, he wasn't aware of the reason why half the village was demolished. So do you feel satiated
Mhm.
having that information now and being able to piece that together and making more people aware of this turn of events that happened in Lapai in Paroni?
Well, that itself is not really any novel, but the fact that that's kind of like what pushed me to get more information and more than just what you'd find in a book, and more go to people and ask them, kind of interview them, have a series of questions, interview them, go deeper into it, and see if I can form a world, because it was a different world back then, and form this world. But the world itself is not the novel. The world is there to to give it the little uplifting, yeah. But um, there's always the characters that tell a story. But to make the world of it, yeah, and those things form the world of it. It wasn't really my intent to get things out there, so to speak, like to make things apparent or to shine a light on certain things. It wasn't really my, like, that's something I never really set out to do with my books. I never really set out to highlight like a issue or anything like that. I usually just have like characters in my mind, but I like to put them in a kind of like an interesting setting and have the setting interact with them.
All right. Okay.
Mm.
And what would you say your writing process is like? What kind of research do you do, or how long do you spend on research before beginning the actual writing process?
Okay, there's different ways in which I do research. I say a lot of it is talking to people, and whatever I could verify, I try to verify. But in terms of research, there's such a thing I think as doing too much research to the point where it sort of bogs down the narrative and you forget about the narrative that you want to write. And I mean, I've suffered from that because there's sometimes there's too many interesting things, and you want to put too many interesting things in your story, and you forget about your characters and you forget about like the real heart of the story. So I try not to do too much. I try to do enough where I am comfortable to build the world. And what if there's anything that I left out or anything that was contradictory to what I was writing, I could always go back and fix it because I try not to make um, historical setting and so on the crux of the story. More like I said, just the flavor. The but there's always stuff that I can go back and fix. So I try not to do too much. Once I come up with the characters, once I come up with the conflict, I usually just get going from that. And I got to see if I had something else. Right. Yeah. And so I wanted to like use an example. Um, Passage, right? So I have a story called Passage, and that was the one that won the 2018 Commonwealth Short Story Prize. And that story there was something that I was inspired by when I was 15. I was about in Form 4, Form 5. And it was about a story, it was a news story that was running at the time that I remember mostly reading on in newspapers. And they found this family in a forest trail, and there was a skeleton of a baby, and what they discovered was that the parents named the children after curse words. So when they were only responding to the curse words, I won't say the words here, but when they took them to the station, they was like fright, there's like scared, like bawling at the TV. Never saw a TV before, and they I believe they put the parents in jail. For there was a law where you couldn't burn, you couldn't just have like a child die and burn the body. So their baby died and they burned the body in a barrel. And all of a sudden the story just disappeared. Like that was the end of the story. And I was like, well, what happened? like
Yeah.
to the children, what happened to the person who find them? But you know how the nature news, that's where the story ends. And I didn't seek to complete that story, but it always stuck with me because it sounds like fiction and it really isn't. So I wanted to sort of retell that, but not as it happened. I wanted to tell it, but I couldn't find like the point of view to tell it from. So it was only much later when I met like a forestry officer who I thought would embody like the narrator of that story. And the story came back to me. And you know, the whole naturalist thing fit with the theme of the story, disturbing the environment and things like that. And that's when I actually wrote that in one night. So when it came to me, it came to me. But it was always there. It was there since I was 16. I only wrote the thing like 10 years later or something. And so it's not really so much how much research. Sometimes the thing is there is just you have to find the angle for it that fits, and then just and that's what I do. I just find when it fits, and I run with it.
Yeah. So it's only when you get those pieces that really fit together, like really match, that it just
Yeah,
blossoms. Yeah. And I feel like that story and the news story in particular definitely embodies the Trinidad is not a real place trope, because it definitely does sound like fiction, and to think that something like that happened here. And then
yeah,
you adding your own twist to it made it a really interesting kind of ethereal story to read in a sense. Yeah. It was very interesting for me, especially in the way that you wrote it and the point of view
yeah,
that you positioned. Okay,
yeah,
so
definitely.
we have some questions that our members would have submitted. So I guess we'll go on with those now. Um, from Arjun, we have, as a writer and illustrator, do you feel like you lean more strongly in one direction or the other?
Okay, so in terms of illustrator, I've really only illustrated just a few things. So, and that was like just mostly my own work that I illustrate. So I'm not a professional at all when it comes to illustration. So I mean, definitely writing. I've been writing for since Form 1, and really only picked up drawing and illustration for just that very short period of time. And so yeah, so definitely writing.
Okay. And so a large part of the writing process is editing. And this question
Right.
comes from our president, Vishala. Can you give us some insight into what your editing process is like, and how do you navigate how do you navigate what works for a particular story and what doesn't?
Okay. So I can break that down into two, which is me self-editing and me working with editors, right? So far I've worked with one, two, three, probably four editors, and so each person's approach is a little different. Well, more than four, but four when it comes to books. Um, for like the ones that are very stringent. So me self-editing is not good. The editing is gonna be gonna be like that for most writers, not all, but most, because as I said, sometimes there can be too many good ideas,
Right.
and you want to keep all of them, and you find that you spend time doing this research, and you be like, no, but it's such a good idea, and people find it so interesting, and it might be for people who read the book, but in the end, really, what you're editing for, and not just not proofreading for typos and grammar and syntax and things like that, but what you are editing is you're trying to keep a pacing to your story. You're trying to keep pace. You're trying to make sure that characters get the spotlight. You're trying to make sure that the conflict is always there. Um, you're always trying to make sure that the words that you use and the sentence structure that you have fit the pacing of that scene. So that's very difficult for a writer to for themselves. As for a final product, for a first draft, it could, but for a final product, that's definitely very tough. So the reason being is because you spend so much time with your book that you become so accustomed with it, you tend to miss things, and you tend to become biased to your own work. You might be overly critical, and you might actually just know, you might focus on one thing and not the others. So you always need a second and a third eye. The I'll give you an example, right? There's the Beast of Cuckoo that was edited by Tanya Batson Savage, right, of Blouse and Skirt, well, Blue Banyan books, and she was she was very stringent. And I wouldn't say not harsh, but very, very meticulous. And I swear I read that manuscript 10 times. And there's a part about 2/3 into the book, or 3/4 into the book, where the protagonist, Rune Matura, she and her friend Tiki, they hotwire a car and to go somewhere. They hotwire it and they go somewhere, they run into trouble, they run back into the car to leave, and then Rune turns the key to leave, right? To start the ignition. So then Tanya, like she's cheaper attachment. She was like, well, the hotwire the car, right? They didn't have a key in the first place. And I was like, well, I read this thing so much that I never noticed that I totally forget that they hotwire the car and they didn't have a key to turn in any ignition. So because now I was so focused on pacing and I was so focused on the grammar and dialogue and so on, I totally forgot continuity, like that they didn't have a key. So it's very, very tough for one person to keep track of all those things. Now, in terms of, let me say, advice on doing it, right? Well, I say the first advice is always get somebody else to read your work. Somebody who is not so much your friend. And I know that might be kind of tough unless you have a very honest friend. Somebody who's not your mother or your father, unless they're very critical, but that's probably not the best thing. Um, I I used to pay someone to do it because people working for money, they're gonna do it. Like they're gonna try and do the best that they could. And so yeah, it's a pay out of my pocket to do it because I was like, you're getting money to do it, you're gonna do it, and you're gonna try to do it right, and I'm paying you again. Um, so, but that is not usually the case. Like when you reach a certain part and somebody want to publish a book, you're not supposed to pay anybody to edit your stuff because that falls into their purview, and they're the ones who are sinking costs into it at that point. This is just like me starting out, like trying to get accustomed to the process. So I've written so much that editing is still difficult for me, but it is much more natural for me to understand pacing and so on. So in terms of working with editors now, so for the Repenters, I worked with Jacob Russ, was the editor for that, and that was at People Tree Press. He was more lax with it. In fact, they didn't want to publish the book. I hope they hear that, but they didn't want to do it because they thought it was a little violent and a little raw, but he fought for it because they say that they would send it to him to read, and if he liked it, they'll do it. So he did, and they say, well, it will fall under him now to try and help me edit it. Now, he was more about economy of words. Is more about sometimes you want to put all your poetic inflections and you want to write 10 lines about one thing. So he was more about just trimming the fat. Some editors like poetic inflection, but they would know they would have to be able to realize what fits with what you're trying to tell. I like poetic inflection. I like that, as I say, that ethereal, surreal kind of feel to the story. I think that's what kind of gives it the mood. So he liked that, but not too much of that. He also, our editor would give you guidance on what you should add to a story. Not so much manipulating the story, what you should add. So in the Repenters, there's a sort of ensemble cast at the beginning of Orphans, but the original draft of it, he never really got an introduction to them. And he said, he described the book to me. He said there's way too many bad things occurring in this book. And he said that not that doesn't happen, but it's very tedious to read. So he said he described it as one long scream. And he was like, well, you need silence in between the screams. So he basically like say, you know, you need to add some humor here so that this bad thing would hit harder. You need to give these characters some a little bit of time to love them from before, you know. So that's like what editor does. They try to allow you to dig deeper into your character, see the true potential of the team that you are going for. So it's a hard job being an editor. And this last one here, where my agent acted as my primary editor, like being my first one, because I assumed that he don't want to send up something that wouldn't sell, because then he wouldn't make any money. If I don't make any, he don't make any. So he acted as that, he and his assistant, and he was real rigorous. He was he's like it just have a long line of emails and a long thing, but um, it is easy to think to get imposter syndrome when you get back your stuff with a bunch of corrections, not corrections, but you know, suggestions as well, and you think, wow, I really don't know how to write, boy. And but that's just how it is. You have to put it aside, and what they're trying to do is help you realize what would work best with the characters, not to change the story, but how to realize, how to perfectly realize the characters. So yeah, that's my experience with it. It's a tough rigorous thing, but ultimately I every single thing I've put out, I've been very happy with it so far, because when you put a book out there, you can't take it back and make corrections and add things and take out things, be like, go out, you know, and sometimes it's things, but I've been happy with so far with what I put out there.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Mm.
Um, and are you stating that now more than before you are a bit more comfortable with the editing process and well with what you're putting out? But when you just started it, because I know previously, well, in previous interviews and whatnot, you'd have said that you took a bit more of an unconventional route getting into
Mm.
writing, into the writing, the business side of it in particular. Did you find it more difficult in the beginning having someone edit your work and I guess takes apart and well help you to make it better? But did you find it difficult in the beginning to just give someone that power in a sense?
Okay, um, so I studied sciences in school. There was no option to do literature. And my degree is in sciences. My degree is in biology and in environmental management. I've always kept up with trying to read and write though. Nothing that I ever thought I would be doing professionally, but it's really just something that was a hobby that used to take up a lot of my time and that I actually enjoyed. So I know that like even if rejections would happen continuously, it was still part of me because I wasn't doing it really to accomplish anything. It was just something I like to do. The So when I first started out, I like back in secondary school, I used to write tons and tons of words. In fact, by the time I was in Form 5, I wrote 100,000 word novel, which is very, very bad and it will never be published. And I used to think, I used to, you know, kind of be full of myself, like in my mind, like, well, you know, already doing this and people just take so long to do this. So first wake up call was when I enrolled in a workshop with Elizabeth Nunes, who is the author of Bruce Hibiscus, and she you're supposed to send in a sample of your writing. So she didn't find the writing was bad or anything, eh? But I was like, oh, I thought she would have taken it's great, you know. And then she had all these suggestions and then I was like, you know what? When she was really talking, and she wasn't harsh or anything like that, when she's really talking, and it had something. that I was thinking, you can't really come to a workshop, you can't really come to uh, a lecture or sign up for a course or something with your head already, with everything full already in your head. You have to kind of empty everything and accept what is new and then try to evaluate it. So that's what I was doing. I went in there thinking I know everything already. And I realized that I said I know nothing. I have to restart, and I have to try to take in what she said because she's published and I'm not. And not everything she would say I would agree with, but is somewhere to start. So it was the first enemy in it was myself, right? I had to throw away the ego, I had to do everything and start really, really knowing that it's not something that I just do willingly. It's something, it is a learning process each time, and it can't be thinking I know everything. The the next thing is so the unconventional route. Now back then, I signed up for that workshop because there were very little opportunities back then. Um, uh, Things like Boca's Literature Festival was just a dream. Them things didn't exist. It didn't have any mentorships, at least for people who were not in that field. There was there was really nothing. There weren't even really any writing groups so much that wasn't just school groups. By the time you reach university, if it wasn't in humanities, there wasn't really much things pushed towards you. Probably I didn't look hard enough, but there wasn't really much things. And so I never really um, thought about it so much back then, but it's only like now I realized, wait, there was really nothing. No guidance, nobody to really come and talk to you, at least who lives here, who has lived there for a while. There's very few authors and those who managed to do it, they did it a long time ago. It's not like they now did it. So it was tough to know that it probably won't happen. But as I said, a lot of my time wasn't really worrying about that. A lot of my time was just I just like to do it, and it was a part of me, and I didn't really need to get out there. And at a certain point, I was going to try. Once the opportunity started showing up, and I started seeing like competitions being posted, like Small Axe and uh, the Burt Award and the Holic Harvard and Commonwealth and those things. And I was like, well, I should try and give it a shot and submit. But I never really expected anything. But I know that what I was doing, I wanted to get better and better at it. And if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. That was really what it was going to be. I wasn't going to like sulk over it or anything like that. But as I said, I will keep doing it.
Right. You just had that natural
Yeah.
passion and drive for it, so you kept doing it.
Yeah.
And well, you're definitely reaping the rewards for the effort that you've put in now. Yeah. And well, you have stated there that there were less opportunities back then than there are now, and that's definitely true. There's a lot more opportunities for upcoming Caribbean writers and people interested in the literature field. Um, what advice would you give from your experience while pursuing the unconventional route, or well, the route that you would have pursued? What advice would you give to people who may have been in your who are in your shoes back then, who did not maybe pursue literature in high school, but still have a passion for this and they still want to do it despite not having done what people typically do when they're interested in that field?
Well, the typical answer is to read a lot and write a lot. Read a lot, to get inspired, write a lot. But um, this is more than just read and write. It's not just about writing a book. Yeah, you can write the best book and it's just there, But so my advice is this: if you are not in the conventional writing field, you probably have something very interesting in the career that you followed. And in fact, there's a lot of people who I don't want to say do both, but there's a lot of people who can elaborate and tell the side of a story that you wouldn't really see from someone who studied writing all their life. So like, I didn't want to use this example, but Charles Bukowski, who was like this, like used to just write about vulgarity and drunkenness, and he was a postman, and he have a book just about working in the post office, and you think it's the most boring book just hearing about it, but it is actually interesting to hear about how bad, like how mismanaged it is. And sometimes you just have to look at your own experience and see how you could put it on in words. The Because we have plenty we have plenty of people who are oral storytellers in Trinidad, and they're very good at telling these stories because sometimes they could just sit down and listen the whole day. They wouldn't write it down or anything, but sometimes they're very good, and you never know if you have that talent to translate that oral storytelling into onto the page until you really try. The thing about writing is that it's so laden with failure. In fact, it's about failure. It's about not getting through and keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and getting a little bit ahead each time, fixing, editing, everything. It's about small little failures and fixing them. And I understand a lot of people are afraid of failure. That the little thing and you think you can't do it. And so that's not so, because that's, I say, with writing is about failing in a way, because you write a first draft and there's a bunch of failures like on each sentence. Like some sentences you just have to scrap altogether. Some chapters you have to scrap altogether. In fact, even in this novel that being published here, Devotion, I probably scrapped initially it was 130,000 words, right? Which is real long. And I had to trim 100,000 words of that for this novel to work. No, sorry, I had to trim it down to 100,000 words for it to work. So that's 30,000 words that just, that was just didn't fit. Um, so the so that's the writing side of it, right? The business side of it is the ugly side. Well, if you already write a book and you wanna get out there, so what you do. Um, so my first book, Little Town, see, I have it right here actually. This little thing here, this little short book, 100 pages. This book here, well, this was self-published, but sort of, by Pot Productions. And what I wanted to do, and is a children's book, and I usually don't really write children's things. But it was something that I wrote long. I was like 21, like in university when I wrote this Spanish script, and I wanted to kind of get a foot in because I didn't have any accolades or anything like that. But I know I wanted to like have something with writing. So the self-published it, tried to make it into a good product. So really read up on how to get the formatting right, how to get everything right, the margins, everything. Because sometimes when people self-publish stuff, I don't know if you ever see, and I don't want to be mean or anything, but it just don't look good. It just like the inside, everything. There's no gutter and there's no the margin is all over the place. The spacing is off, and it's just not a well put together product. So I wanted like a really put together product, and so it was a case of kind of work smart, and I aimed it at children because I'm a teacher, right? And I said, well, I could just give it to children, and I said, well, if you like it, pay for it, right? And tell your friends, and then and new teachers. So I was like, tell other teachers, here, look the books. If the teacher wants to do it for their class, tell them call me. And we'll organize something. They could order some books. So it was a case of work smart rather than just write a book and just dump it. And it actually did it actually sold pretty well, probably more than some of the other stuff. And it was like my start into it, and is what kind of gave me momentum, like personal momentum to go forward. Um, so you have to think about who your audience is. Think about getting an easy audience at first. You don't want to write a 1,000-page novel and then you have nobody to sell it to, you have nobody to give it to. And if you're a first-time writer, write something short. Don't write something too long. Write something that's like 60, 70,000 words. That's short. When we come to that, 60,000 words, I think, because it's easier to sell. It's easier to, a publisher would, if you're a first-time author, they might want to take the risk of having a big book, you know, because there's costs. Agents and so on would see a shorter novel, and they would likely take the chance on it if you're a first-time writer. Also there's a thing, because of globalization, because everything is online, agents are actually a lot more accessible now. You can actually directly submit to some agent. I mean, they might take half a year to get back to you, but you can actually directly submit to some of them. You don't have to win a prize or anything like that. Once you have something that you believe could sell, so you believe that could be of interest, you could fix it. Make sure you fix it up first though, because sometimes if you don't get through and you keep, I don't think it's submit like 10 times, I think, but make sure that it's good quality, and then find an agent that does work that fits yours, and they always have a profile up. Send it to them, see if they like it. If they don't like it, that's fine. There's many other agents out there, but I would suggest to try and get an agent. It's not easy, but there are a lot of agents, so there's a lot of people you can try and submit to.
Okay. So find your niche, find your audience, find that agent that best fits your style.
That best fits you, yeah. You don't have an agent that is not that doesn't like your work, or is just like so about your work. Because that's the worst. They're not gonna try to push it. They're not gonna believe in you enough.
Yeah. So you want to find someone that's genuinely interested and genuinely excited about what you have created, because they're gonna put that energy into getting it out there and getting it sold.
You want the best energy.
Yes, that. Okay. We have so one of our members, Bridget, had a question. It states, there is an old saying that says that you're only as good as the audience of the people that read and have an interest in your work. Otherwise, what's the point? What are your thoughts on this saying, and how do you think you would have dealt with the prospect of not winning prizes such as the Commonwealth Short Story Prize? And would this have deterred you from continuing to write in any?
I think the person that submitted that question probably submitted a lot of things that ended up getting rejected, and I fully understand the question. I thought it's a very good question. Okay, so I think it's two parts, right? I have it right here.
Yeah.
Right. Who want to submit their work? Wait, no. Right, so only as good as the audience or the people that read and are interested in your book. All right, so what's the point? Okay, so that one's a tough one. I know that because I haven't really, it hasn't really been this big. I mean, I've always wanted to be a writer. I've never actively tried for a lot of time to actually publish. I actually didn't think it would have happened, at least in the way that it did. So if it didn't happen, I would not mind that much, honestly. I would have keep trying. And I would have still be proud at the work that I have, because is something that, as I said, I enjoy doing. It's something that occupies a very large portion of my mind, and is things I like spending time with. Now, if you are let me say that's is not getting out there, right? The work is not getting out there. What do you do? Sometimes you have to look at the work and stop thinking about the writing side of it and think about the business side of it. And that could be, I say that's the ugly thing, because then you'll be, what was it? You'll be compromising what you artistically wanted to do. Um, I say publishing is like that, and the my prizes have their own type of, I don't want to say politics, but prizes have their own type of mechanism. So there's very little. I mean, think about it, it's kind of like lottery, right? There's only so much people could win the lottery, and other people is probably get kind of air with me when I say prizes. It's like the lottery, because be like, and you win like how much times? Well, yeah, but I've lost like a lot. The I don't really post about how much I, I enter and don't get through. That real plenty. that things I enter like 6, 7 times I never get through. Commonwealth is at our advantage, because if we look at the other regions of it, Africa, Asia, I mean, the majority of the submissions coming from those countries. In fact, the Caribbean is only have about 100 submissions. Trinidad is have about 40, Jamaica's have about 40, and the other 20 is be from the other islands. So you at least stand a good chance to at least shortlist with the Commonwealth. But it's still out of 100, and sometimes they might just shortlist 4 or 5, and you could be number 6. The But it's not to get, I guess, dejected so much over it, because it's not really about, to me, it's not really about the end product and the audience so much. Yes, our audience is very, very nice, and the promise of our advance and the promise of publication is very nice. Those things have been secondary to me in a way. They've been nice, and sometimes it's not going to happen right now. Sometimes the wheels are not turning right now for it. Because if I was to submit something like this 10 years ago, it probably would not get published, because there's interplay of many different things and the market changes. Because let me say I was to submit a vampire novel today, it probably wouldn't really get much traction. But if I submitted it 10 years ago, everybody would jump on it, because everybody is into Twilight and the Vampire Chronicles and all kind of thing back then. If I was to submit some kind of young adult fantasy world kind of thing 10 years ago, it probably get through real good. If I was to do it today, it probably wouldn't. So there's always the outside mechanism of what publishers and agents look for. And I think what a lot of them are looking for now, well, stories that are outside of your typical thing. So basically, like people of color kind of stories. Not to say that that's what you should write or that's what you should focus on, but if you know that your novel involves something like that, you stand a better chance. So whatever you want to write, you should write, because if 10 years, it mightn't happen now, like they mightn't want it now, right? But if you do it and you do it well, and your characters resound, like your characters are universal in a way, and your team is universal. The setting could be anything. The setting could be 1940s Trinidad, like my thing that nobody know about. And in fact, the eight publishers that came in, nobody know like what like they know Trinidad exists, but they don't know anything about it. They know it's a Caribbean island, but the characters spoke to them. The characters was the universal things. That was the driving force. The team was a universal thing. And sometimes the setting and so on, that the climate of the story, some maybe now is not the time for it. I wouldn't know that, you wouldn't know that, sometimes the publishers themselves don't even know that. But keep doing it because I say the wheels always turning. And at one point, it will be in demand. Once you have your universal characters and a universal theme that resound with readers.
And I guess that kind of answers the other question that I would have had as well, in terms of what advice you would offer to up and coming writers who want to submit. Yeah, we kind of touched on that, but yeah,
Yeah.
what other advice would you offer to up and coming writers who want to submit their works to initiatives like the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, but are too scared to take that leap of faith due to the fear of failure?
Okay. So I'll add something to that, right? Commonwealth Short Story Prize judges are people. They are just people, they are just human beings. And human beings tend to like some things and dislike some things. Just because it didn't get through, that doesn't mean anything that the story is bad or anything. It just means that that particular judge wasn't into that, right? So so I work for the past 2 years, since I won the 2018 one. I tell them I retire and I never enter in a competition again after this. I'm done with competitions and I'm just gonna focus on just writing work and novels and see what I could do with it. I say I'm done. I'm done with competition. I'm done with getting rejection letters and thank you for submitting, but whatever. I say I'm done. So they asked me if I wanted to work as a sifter, right? So a sifter. So a sifter is sort of a person who would go through the entries and see which ones which ones are the correct format. Some people put a name and thing on it, and it'd be like, oh well, we got to get rid of those. See which ones have the correct spacing. So always follow the rules, by the way. For competition, sometimes you could submit the best story and then your name on it, and I did that already. That happened to me already. I don't know if it was the best story, but I realized my name was on it, so it was automatic disqualification. And so always follow the rules for where you enter, right? So that's one. The things that most competitions look for is that if you look in short story, your primary angle with any short story is make sure it is about the characters. Make sure it's about the characters and make sure that you have some kind of pivot or focal point that the reader would attach to, because you would follow this character. It doesn't have to be first person or third person. You would follow this character and you have to feel what they feel, because a short story is like a experience, and you want that experience to last longer than the time that you took to read the short story. So when I read through a lot of them, there are a lot of good ones, and a lot of good ones are actually surprised that don't make the short list, because it's not up to me. I'm just the one who says these are the ones that are grammatically correct, or well, not grammatically correct, but that follow the rules. And yeah, so they do. So basically, the judge would read those. So, but yeah, I still read through. For the last 2 years, I've read through all of them, even the ones that shortlisted. I don't know who submitted them. It's only when I see the names, I was like, oh, okay. Like when I was like, oh, yeah. But who won this? Roland Watson Grant won this. I didn't even know that was like his thing. I like read that and was like, yeah, this pretty good. And so I could see that from people who submit that they have a lot of good ideas. They have good ideas, but felt like they didn't spend enough time forming that pivotal character they're gonna follow. They like research, real good ideas, real good vocabulary, but the character itself is just a blank slate. The character is just this person that they just come up with to show off the words, you know what I mean? So the always, if you submit it for any short story thing, always put the character first. Put the character first, everything else after. The next thing is this. Be real careful about what you're submitting to. Um, I'll say that in two ways. Make sure that what you're submitting to has integrity. You should never pay. Yes, some things ask to pay for submission. That is to make up the prize money. Never pay anybody anything to publish your work, right? And if somebody agreed to publish your work for free, be very like they're paying you anything, be wary of that too, especially because once they put that out there, you can't do anything else with that. There's a high chance that you won't even be able to use it in a competition. And then you'd be wrapped up in all kind of thing. If you submit it to anthology and the anthology getting published, and now you have to ask this person to take it down, and what if they don't want to take it down, right? So try not to put anything out there for free. If the people want to put it up, let them pay it. The it's kind of like doing something for likes or exposure, right? So and sometimes you would feel inclined to it because you'd be like, oh God, I'm not getting through with anything. Look, this person putting up nothing, right? That's likes. That's not how it's supposed to be. The last thing I was gonna say is this, right? So that's one thing. Also be careful of when you submit them, I say be careful as well. Some things, and I'm gonna say names, right? But some things they would say, we take in entries from all over, right? And when you see the long list, it's just people from that country that host the competition. So like it had something I submitted to, right? It was like this this kind of strange competition, but it had integrity. And it was like when I look at the long list had like 20 people, all from the UK, all from the UK. And then they had a little caption at the top. We received submissions from all the way from so and so to Trinidad and Tobago. But they're just looking to boast now. You know what I mean? That
The list didn't reflect that.
Yeah, just want to reflect that, yeah, we received from, right? So so that's why I say sometimes you have judges. Judges are humans. You have judges that will more they will be more drawn to stuff that they know and that they're comfortable with. That's the thing about competitions. Competitions so mass marketed that it's they'll just be drawn to, if they're from the UK, probably they will just be interested in things in the UK. They're not gonna spend much time trying to figure out Trinidadian Creole English. That don't mean don't write in Trinidadian Creole English or anything, yeah. Write what you want to write. If that judge don't like it, that's them. But that's what I say, just be wary of those factors. These people are humans, they're not gods. And if they don't pick your story, that really doesn't have anything to reflect on you. But you should always go back to your story and make sure that the characters pop in.
Yeah. So it really seems like character development is critical. It plays a critical role in how well your story is received universally.
Oh yes. Think about any movie that you like. The character has to be the main character has to be like synonymous to the movie themselves. Like if there's a movie, I just use a movie as an example. If there's a movie and you don't know that, you can't remember that main character's name, right? And you don't care to know their name, that's not a good one. So think about your story as a way that your main character has to be synonymous to that story. It has to be on the level of that story. If you are right, so on the level of a certain setting and you want to take a setting to the next level, you want to take this team to the next level, make sure that the character matches that. Because people don't so much remember setting and things so much as more remember character, how the character interacted with that setting, how what the things the character did. If they failed, if they succeeded, if they didn't succeed, why didn't they succeed? But that is really what follows it, and that's usually things that get attention.
Right. Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, I guess just to wrap up everything, we have one last question, which a
Mm.
lot of us are excited to hear the answer to. And this would be, what books have you been reading? Have you been enjoying lately? And can you offer some recommendations to us?
Okay, so I try to write down like a short list here. So the book I've been reading is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I don't know if that's part of was part of your book club yet. Is a it I bought the book like when it won the Man Booker. Um, I just kind of shelved it, and only like I only recently started picking it up and reading it, and totally blown away by this because the book is pretty much just like loose characters, like characters loosely interacting with each other, but each chapter is dedicated to a certain character and shows how it tells the different point of views and from each I don't say female because not bad, but each generation is very generational. And for someone to write from those different points of views and write so authentically, for as far as I know, is impressive on that level, but it's also enjoyable to read. Sometimes things could be impressive, but they're not enjoyable to read. But it's also enjoyable to read. And it in terms of like if to study how something is written and to discuss, there's a lot to discuss there. So that's what I've been reading. The last thing I've read before that was a book called The Sound of the Mountain. It's a Japanese novella by Yasunari Kawabata. Um, it's a very quiet story that's just about is about this old man that his son is having an affair with his son is having an affair with his daughter-in-law, right? Well, with the son is having an affair with his wife, and the the father becomes very close to the daughter-in-law, almost a romantic sense. It's not a romance novel, but the quietness of it and the way in which it portrays that relationship um, with very spare language that is still very effective. That's the last thing I read. So things that I'd recommend, well, those two of course, but things I'd recommend. Um, there's a short story collection called Close Range by Annie Proulx. It contains the short story, well, Brokeback Mountain, which is made into a movie. Her writing is again is it there's periods where it could be very spare, and there's periods where it could be have a lot of poetic flourish. And but her stories are always about characters, and they always very interesting to study. She doesn't overstate things. You have to kind of figure out a lot of the things for yourself. A next book I'd recommend is Room by Emma Donoghue. I read this a few years ago. A film was made on it. Room is told from a child's point of view whose mother was kidnapped by a man years ago, and they were raised in this kind of shed together, and all the boy knows is the room. And the fact that what makes the story special is that it's told from his point of view. And midway through the story, something happens I don't expect. And again, it's just about as the mother than the child, but it's about how it's very difficult to let go of like pain and difficult to let go of trauma. The Road is another book I'd recommend. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I read The Road many years ago, maybe when I was in university. And I read a lot of Cormac McCarthy novels, and there's something about The Road in particular. He usually writes with a lot of flourish as well, but The Road is structured in such a way that is in this post-apocalyptic world. But what was interesting about it to me is that the sentence structure and the paragraph structure mimic minimal, minimal things, is minimal without being minimal. Just how it looks like a wasteland, like just how the words are laid out. And I always thought that was very interesting, that to the point where it's not just the story that he's telling, not just the language, but how he actually laid out the words that reflects this this doom-like atmosphere. And the last thing I'd recommend is The Doll Master and Other Tales of Terror by Joyce Carol Oates. I'm a very big fan of horror stories. And there's few that would actually pull it off really well. Early Stephen King, he did it well, not so much now. Joyce Carol Oates is an author I discovered. I always knew her name, but she's one that I started reading a little late. And everything I've read by her has been fantastic. There are two short stories in there in particular, which is one is called Equatorial and one is called Solia. Solia is about this is a short story. Solia is about this is about a white cop shooting a black man, but it's told from the cop's point of view, right? So you see it from his point of view, and which could be you have to be real brave, like to tell that story from that point of view and try to make that character sympathetic. And she didn't actively try to make him sympathetic, but she told it in such a way that you was really interested in what he had to say. For somebody to actually do that successfully, you have to be real brave. But it really good. So there was that. I have a next short story called Equatorial. The first part of Equatorial is just about this couple, this couple who's going down some very, very steep stairs. And the wife who is in front of the husband is behind her, gets this deathly fear all of a sudden that the husband is going to throw her off the stairs. And off the stairs is just like a cliff. And a large portion of the story is just that. That all of a sudden she has this fear that the husband is going to push her off, this man that she's been married to, but who has been married to 3 other women before. Some under mysterious circumstances, and is a very, very good examination of fear and character and how things that are subconscious could just creep back on you, like out of seemingly nowhere, and make you just question everything. So this stuff that I tried to come up with some things that I believe would be interesting and generate discussion. So hopefully that list wasn't too short, but yeah, those were 5 books.
Definitely provides a lot of reading material. I'm particularly interested in that collection of short stories. I think I'll go looking for those stories sound intriguing to see this. Well, I do suppose that brings us to the end of this interview, Mr. Hosein. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And it's been an absolute pleasure trying to pick your brain about your novel and about your writing process. And I'm just extremely excited to read your novel once it has been released. While we do await that, everyone, make sure that you check out his other novels and short stories available to you. And we await the release of Devotion next year.
Me too. I await it too. I'm more excited than anybody for August. So yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you.